In a series of developments that have drawn global attention, Russian state media has portrayed the recent Ukrainian incursion into the Kursk region as part of a broader trap set by the Kremlin, suggesting that President Vladimir Putin is strategically positioned to turn the situation to his advantage.
It appears that the enemy is aiming to improve its negotiating positions in the future. Well, what kind of negotiations can we even talk about with people who launch indiscriminate strikes on civilians, on civilian infrastructure, and try to create threats to nuclear energy facilities? What can you talk to them about?
Speculation about Ukraine's objectives and the potential outcomes of this daring cross-border operation continues to grow as the conflict enters an increasingly complex phase. Kremlin-aligned outlets, including RIA Novosti and Tsargrad, have emphasized Russia's apparent control over the unfolding situation. RIA Novosti, in an editorial published 1 week after the initial Ukrainian advance, asserted that Russian forces were taking control of the situation. Meanwhile, Tsargrad reported that Ukrainian brigades had fallen into a trap and were now facing heavy losses, a narrative that aligns with Moscow's broader attempts to depict Ukraine's actions as ultimately self-defeating. However, this portrayal contrasts with reports from the ground, including those from Russian military bloggers who have acknowledged Ukrainian gains. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed that his forces had captured the town of Sudzha, underscoring the effectiveness of Kyiv's offensive.
The advance forces are continuing to take part in battles. There have been advances from 1 to 3 kilometers towards the enemy in some areas. Battles are ongoing along the entire front line. The situation as a whole is under control. Everything is going according to plan.
Despite the successes reported by Ukraine, questions remain about the long-term objectives of the operation and the potential for Russia to exploit the situation. Some experts believe that Kyiv's push into the Kursk region, rather than focusing on solidifying its positions in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region, could expose its forces to a devastating counterattack from Moscow. Experts suggest that while Ukraine's immediate gains may be significant, the operation risks overextending its military resources and personnel, an outcome that could play into Putin's hands. The potential for a Russian counteroffensive is further underscored by reports of dwindling Russian troop numbers on the front lines in Ukraine's eastern and southern regions. The high casualty rates have strained Russia's military capacity, prompting the Kremlin to offer increased recruitment bonuses in a bid to bolster its forces. Despite these efforts, the effectiveness of Russia's recruitment drive remains uncertain, leading to speculation that Putin may resort to a broader mobilization by the end of the year. Moscow's narrative that the Kursk incursion is a Western-backed threat to Russia's sovereignty may serve to bolster domestic support for Putin's policies. By framing Ukraine as a proxy of Western aggression, Putin could reinforce the idea that Russia is under siege, galvanizing public sentiment and justifying further military actions, according to military experts. This approach could also be used to strengthen the Kremlin's position on the global stage, particularly in its ongoing confrontation with NATO and the West.
There is already a response from Russian citizens. This is unanimous support for everyone who is in trouble, support for the army, and an increase, which is very important, an increase in the number of people willing to join our men, the fighters who heroically defend Russia with weapons in their hands. The number of those willing to sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense has increased in recent days.
The possibility of a widespread mobilization aligns with Putin's broader strategic goals, which include maintaining control over Russia's narrative and reinforcing the country's military capabilities. Some experts suggest that this move could also be presented to the Russian public as a necessary measure to protect the nation from foreign threats, particularly in light of the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. As the situation in Kursk continues to develop, the long-term implications for both Russia and Ukraine remain uncertain. While Kyiv's forces have demonstrated their ability to challenge Russian positions, the question of whether this incursion will lead to a decisive strategic advantage or a costly overextension looms large. For Putin, the operation presents an opportunity to consolidate his power and potentially shift the momentum of the conflict in Russia's favor. In the meantime, President Zelensky has hailed the achievements of his forces in the Kursk region, emphasizing the damage inflicted on Russian logistics and military capabilities. He has reiterated that the goal of the operation is to weaken Russia's ability to wage war by targeting key supply routes and reserves.
There have already been several reports by Commander-in-Chief Syrski about the frontline situation and our operation in the Kursk region. We see that the occupier is suffering losses, and this is helpful, very helpful for our defense. It is about destroying the logistics of the Russian army and draining their reserves. We must inflict maximum damage on all Russian positions, and we are doing that. I thank each of our warriors for their precision. I thank them for strength and for resilience. Commander-in-Chief Syrski reported on our defensive steps in the Donbas, Pokrovsk and Toretsk directions, as well as our advance in the Kursk region. We are eliminating the Russian military presence in the area of our operations there and replenishing the exchange fund for our state.
The coming weeks will likely determine whether the Ukrainian incursion into Kursk represents a turning point in the conflict or a temporary disruption that Russia can ultimately overcome.